My sister-in-law has a wedding on a tropical island and calls me jealous. Finally, she knocks on my door to ask for money. I have a sister-in-law who is one of the most dramatic people you can imagine. Listen to this. She wants to have this big destination wedding, but says everyone has to pay for their own trip to get there. I can't afford it, I'm not in that position. So I tell her, hey, sorry, but I can't go to your wedding. Guys, she absolutely goes into bridezilla mode, freaking out at me, and you won't believe what she did next. Have you ever been the type of person who prefers to save money rather than spend it on expensive things? It doesn't matter why you decide to save the money, but the point is that it's your goal. Well, I'm that kind of person. My second question is whether people have made fun of you for doing so, saying that you're cheap or too disciplined. Well, that also happened to me, and the culprit was my sister-in-law. Look, I've always been the type of person who saves a lot of money. I grew up in a working-class family that did everything possible to save money and not struggle. But it was tough when they had kids to support. Because of this, I decided that the best option for me was to save money for a house and a car, and have savings before even thinking about having kids. This was assuming I ever got married, because I had to meet the right person after going to college, on a scholarship by the way. I got a job at a medical practice. Here, I met a man named Tyler. Tyler also worked at the medical practice, just across from where I work. At first, we were just playfully flirting with each other. It wasn't meant to be anything serious, but then he asked me out. It had been a while since I'd been on a date, so I thought, why not? Nothing bad is going to happen. We had a great time together. We stayed out late, and he even insisted on walking me to my car. From there, a relationship started. Well, it was around a year into the relationship when he asked me if I thought it was a good time for us to move in together. Although I wanted to get married, I thought it was too soon, and honestly, living with someone before getting married seemed like a good idea, at least in my opinion. So, we both planned to get an apartment together. In 2 months, we were now living together and we were closer than ever. To be honest with you, on our second anniversary, Tyler decided to propose, and I accepted immediately. I can't even begin to tell you how happy I was to get married. From the moment our families found out we were getting married, everyone was excited. The problem came with my future sister-in-law, Margot. I always thought she was a bit over the top and dramatic. She was more extravagant than I was and could be snobbish. Her parents raised her and Tyler in a middle-class lifestyle, so I don't know where this behavior came from. Anyway, she got the idea that our wedding had to be huge. A big dress, a big venue, and just everything big. The bigger, the better, according to her. However, this wasn't something that appealed to me at all. All I wanted was a small wedding. You see, Tyler and I had already talked about this beforehand. After he proposed, we started seriously discussing our future. We were both going to have a small wedding and try our best to save up over the next few years for a house. Then, and only then, would we start trying to have the kids we always wanted. This was something Tyler and I had established from the beginning of our relationship. When we told Margot our plan to have a small wedding instead of a big one, she was outraged. I have no idea why she was so angry because it wasn't her wedding. She told me that I would be making the biggest mistake of my life if I didn't have a big wedding. Then she said I'd regret it because, according to her, a woman always wanted a big wedding. That this was just a well-known fact. No matter how many times she told me, I just wasn't going to change my mind at all. I mean, I knew I wasn't going to want a wedding like that. A small wedding was going to be perfect. It was everything Tyler and I wanted. To be honest, for our honeymoon, we were going to a cabin in the mountains for the weekend. Simple, but very romantic. And honestly, I couldn't wait to be able to spend a weekend with Tyler. Then came Monday when we'd return to our regular lives, and honestly, there was nothing wrong with that. Margot kept warning me that I would regret it. It got to the point where I just told her to drop it. When I said it, I did so in a gentle tone so she wouldn't think I was yelling at her or anything like that. However, she still took it very personally. Tyler must have said something to calm her down because on the day of our wedding, she was fine, although she was still judging everything. My dress wasn't fancy enough, the venue was too small, the food was too simple, and everything wasn't up to our standards. When I look back at the photos, I don't think about any of that. I'm filled with a sense of happiness because it's the day I finally got to marry the man I love. If Margot didn't like my wedding, so be it. It was my wedding, not hers. To me, weddings are just a one-time event. Why spend thousands of dollars on one day? The same goes for buying an expensive wedding dress. So, the wedding went off without a hitch, and so did the honeymoon. Well, when we got back, we finally started working towards our goal of getting a house. and I knew this was going to take some time because the real estate market was a mess. All the houses were expensive. So if we were going to have a chance of getting a mortgage, then we needed to save up a decent amount of money for the down payment. If you're thinking that my dear sister-in-law didn't approve of this, then you'd be correct. She didn't understand the concept of saving every penny for a house, or at least if we were going to save, we could at least get some credit cards and buy things with that. I don't know how long I looked at her, trying to think of something to say when she said that. It was safe to say that I was in shock at Margot's words. Why did she keep insisting that we live her kind of life? I didn't know specific details, but I knew she had some debt. Her parents weren't that rich either, so they couldn't do much to help her pay off the debt. Even though I understood her twisted mentality, it wasn't the way Tyler and I wanted to live our lives. She even went as far as accusing me of brainwashing my husband, forcing him to live a life without fun. Tyler stopped her because it was ridiculous to say that. Tyler was his own man, and I was my own woman. We were married, but we were also independent people. So the years passed, and Tyler and I continued living our lives. Margot, my sister-in-law, remained as dramatic as usual, acting like life was a fairy tale. I used to warn her that having that attitude toward life wasn't going to do her any favors. If anything, it was going to cause her a lot of problems in the long run. But you know what? She refused to see any reason. According to her, well, I was just envious. Anyway, it's ridiculous, but as I said, she was a drama queen, so I just ignored her and continued to ignore her. Of course, I still saw her at family events, but I didn't pay any attention to her. I just let her words roll off me. It was the easiest way to deal with things like this. About 3 years after our marriage, my sister-in-law finally mentioned that she was getting married. I was a little surprised because she had only been dating her boyfriend Thomas for 6 months. Tyler and I had been dating for 2 years before he proposed to me. Well, 6 months didn't seem like enough time. They didn't know each other beforehand, but that was her life. So if she wanted to marry Thomas, then I thought, so be it. It was her life, not mine. When we finally received the wedding invitation, I expected it. My sister-in-law and I had our issues, but I still wanted to support her at the wedding, you know? That was the intention until we found out it was a destination wedding, where Margot expected everyone to pay for their own trip. Yes, we're talking about going to a wedding on an island they were organizing because it was already expensive enough. However, I'm sorry, we just couldn't do this. We couldn't be a part of it. Tyler and I were trying to save for a house, and if we ended up going to this wedding, well, we wouldn't have anything left. My sister-in-law didn't take it well. She demanded that we go, and if we didn't, then we would be excluded from her life forever. The rest of the family also started pressuring us, telling us that we had to go and that there was no option. This is because we're talking about family, and when family is involved, you know you'll do whatever it takes to make them happy. Honestly, I thought this was a bit twisted and quickly stopped them all. I told them we were going to send a gift in the card, but that was honestly all we could do. Well, Margot told me to shove the gift where the sun doesn't shine and said she didn't want anything from me if we didn't show up at the wedding. Well, she also called me a bunch of names, but there's no point in repeating them. The last thing I told Margot before hanging up was that she and her husband should consider having a local wedding because it wasn't worth spending so much money on what was just one day of their lives. What if an emergency or something like that came up? However, Margot didn't accept any of that. She told me to get out of here and that it wasn't my business. What happened next was quite disappointing. My mother-in-law and father-in-law ended up being convinced by Margot to turn against us. Much of the family turned against us because the way Margot told it, we were jealous. And that's why we weren't going to the wedding. This couldn't be further from the truth, guys. I wasn't jealous of Margot at all. It simply wasn't worth spending the money. I would still buy them a gift, which was what Tyler and I were determined to do. There was nothing more we could do than that. I was perfectly fine with not going to the wedding because it seemed like my sister-in-law thought it would be a punishment for us not to go. But she was wrong about that. I didn't care even if I went on social media and saw how much fun they were having, it didn't matter. The only part of this that I regretted was causing a problem between him and his parents. He just reminded me that this was a losing battle. If it hadn't happened by now, then it would have happened later. It's safe to say that when Tyler and I finally have kids, his family won't know them. Update 1. After the wedding, my sister-in-law flooded our social media. I didn't go to the wedding, which was a destination wedding on some beautiful and expensive island. The reason we didn't go was that we were saving for a house. The good news is that Tyler and I are getting closer to being able to buy one. But this is about my sister-in-law and not the house I'll be able to make a down payment on. The reason I knew my sister-in-law had a great time is because she kept trying to tell us by tagging us on social media. Most people have social media, and the same goes for me. Tyler and I mainly use social media to keep up with family. However, Margot decided to take advantage of this. She started tagging us, but when this didn't get any reaction, my sister-in-law started sending us private messages. At first, it was fine, but it bothered me that I kept getting notifications from her. I guess I could delete my social media, but I use it to stay connected with family who don't live in the area. So, I didn't want to do this. The only thing I could think of was to block my sister-in-law on literally every platform. When she realized I had blocked her, she started doing the same to Tyler. Eventually, he was forced to do the same thing I did. When my mother-in-law and father-in-law found out about this, they started asking us why we were being so cruel to my sister-in-law. Tyler told them that we were tired of being bombarded with photos and messages. According to them, we were angry because she was expressing her happiness and joy. That wasn't the issue at all. The only reason we were blocking her was that she kept personally reaching out to rub these images in our faces, as if they bothered us, which they didn't, I should add. My sister-in-law could go ahead and post her wedding photos everywhere. If I came across one or two while scrolling through my social media, I would simply think, oh, how nice, and then move on with my day. It was so childish of my sister-in-law to rub it in my face. This also made her delusional because she was operating under the assumption that I was jealous. Come on, seeing these photos would make me overwhelmed with jealousy and unable to function. At first, I felt a little sorry because I knew it wasn't a good idea for my sister-in-law and now brother-in-law to spend so much on a wedding. However, at that moment, I was just annoyed with Margot. Now that she was blocked, my hope was that she would stay away. She said she was cutting us off, so why couldn't she just stick to that and make everyone happy? Update 2. A year later, we have a house. Hey guys, I know it's been about a year, and there was no need to give you an update until now because nothing happened after Tyler and I blocked Margot. We didn't hear from her at all. It was amazing and truly peaceful, and I enjoyed this break, choosing instead to focus on work, spending time with my husband and friends, and simply enjoying life. If you're wondering why I'm bothering you with this update, well, it's because I'm happy to tell you that we now have a house. After years of saving money, we were finally able to afford a down payment. Of course, we first needed to find a house, which we did. After looking at some places, we found a single-family home with 3 bedrooms and 2 bathrooms. It had a nice fenced yard and just seemed perfect for raising a family. So, about 2 weeks ago, Tyler and I were finally able to move in. And there are still a lot of boxes around the house, but we're slowly unpacking. I have no idea if Tyler's family even knows that we got the house. We haven't spoken to his parents or sister at all. And as for extended family members, the conversation has been limited and we only talk to them about specific issues. Tyler makes sure they only have a certain amount of interaction, lest they go back to his dad and mom to tell them everything about what we're doing. It's not that I wanted to cut them off. If they would just come to us and apologize, then I would welcome them with open arms. No one wanted to sever family ties like that. However, they would not only have to apologize for their current behavior but also for how they treated Tyler his entire life. He always felt that he wasn't good enough for his parents, no matter what he did. It was always Margot this and Margot that. Well, a person can only take so much crap before they get tired and fed up. I was the middle child, with a younger brother and an older sister, and my parents always treated us absolutely equally, no matter what. They even started treating Tyler like a son, which made him very happy. It was even more important now that his relationship with his parents was in jeopardy. He feared that Margot would somehow find out where we lived and just show up out of nowhere. I could totally see her doing that, disrupting the new home we created. We've only been living here for 2 weeks. I mean, could we at least get a break in the place before she decided to start her nonsense? Tyler seemed to think that Margot wasn't going to come and that she was just done with us. She was probably living her life somewhere and, well, I don't know, spending money she didn't have. I hoped that somehow she could pay off that expensive wedding. I wasn't aware of the total cost of the wedding. It was probably a couple of $100,000, possibly more than $200,000. How someone could spend that much on a single day is beyond me. Well, I wasn't trying to judge people who decided to spend $30,000 or $50,000 on a wedding. You know, it's their right. The difference with my sister-in-law is that she didn't have the money to do this. I know she took out some sort of loan to pay for it, which is why she was so insistent that people pay for their own flights. Update 3. My sister-in-law came for a visit out of nowhere. The last update I gave was about how Tyler and I were finally able to get the house of our dreams. Now, when I posted that, I thought that was going to be the last update I'd have to give. I never thought I'd be back here, ready to vent about my sister-in-law Margot, who finally made an appearance. Yes, you read that right, and believe me, I'm very angry. I thought I was done with her, and then there was a knock on my door. When I opened it, I saw Margot standing there. So my first question was how she found out where we lived. She said she had a friend who lived on this block and saw us moving in. Margot didn't clarify who this friend was, which made me angry. So I just asked her what the hell she wanted. Then my sister-in-law explained that she and her husband Thomas weren't doing well. They took out a big loan to pay for the wedding, but now they couldn't pay it back. The reason for this was that Thomas had a car accident that resulted in a lot of medical bills. It also led to him losing a job and being on unemployment while trying to get some disability benefits. Well, if I knew anything about unemployment, it was that it didn't pay well. With just Margot working, it would make sense that, well, they were having trouble paying the loan. I told her I was sorry because I didn't know what else to say. It really was a shame this happened to her. But when Margot didn't tell me why she had come, I once again asked her what she wanted. That's when she told me she needed money. She asked her parents or in-laws, but both were working-class families and didn't have any to give. My first reaction was to burst out laughing when I finally processed what she said. Margot was offended, obviously, but she was quick to remind me of what I said. None of this was my problem. I warned Margot about doing something like this, but she went against my advice and now found herself in a no-win situation. So I told her to leave me alone and slammed the door in her face. Sure enough, she started pounding on the door even harder, but eventually left when some neighbors came out to see what the problem was. Even though she left, I knew my sister-in-law would be back. There was no way I was rid of her. So, to teach her that I wasn't going to help her under any circumstances, I decided to print a sign on my printer. It said, "You reap what you sow." I put it in a frame and then hung it on my front door. When Tyler saw it, he burst out laughing. He said it was going to make his sister very angry, but he was completely okay with that. After all, she deserved it. And sure enough, Margot showed up the next day. It turned out I was working from home that day, so I heard her yelling from inside the house as she pounded on the door, demanding that I help her. My response was simply to turn up the music, put on my headphones, and ignore her. Eventually, Margot left but told me that I wasn't going to get away with treating her like that. I was family, and it was my duty to help her. Well, I wanted to point out that she was the one who decided to cut us all off, but I wasn't going to get into that again. Update 4. Hey guys. Yes, I'm back. The last time I posted here was a few days ago, telling you all about my sister-in-law who came crying to ask for our help. You see, she got herself into a little trouble over a loan she took out to pay for the wedding, due to a sudden medical bill that came up. This was something I warned her about multiple times, but she refused to even see reason. After showing up at my door twice, we didn't hear anything else. But the silence only made me more nervous because I felt like she was planning something. You know, the night of our housewarming party was when Margot decided to show up. Tyler and I didn't invite her or any of the other members of her family. She must have been asking her friend who lived in the area to keep an eye out, which honestly is very, very creepy. She didn't have a life or something like that. She seemed to be super obsessed with us. Well, on the day of the housewarming party, we were in the backyard enjoying the nice weather. Tyler was grilling, and it was a great day to be able to have the party in the new house we worked so hard for. Soon, Tyler and I were going to start trying for kids, but we were keeping it a secret for now. We didn't want to say anything until we were sure I was pregnant. It was just before we started eating when I heard the sound of Margot yelling at me. I looked and saw her trying to climb over the fence. Unfortunately, the fence wasn't that high, and Margot eventually managed to climb over. Once she was in our backyard, she started running toward me, but Tyler was able to react and grab his sister. She was much smaller than him, so he overpowered her. I took that moment to grab my phone and call the police to say that someone was trespassing on our property. They showed up and tried to tell Margot to leave. However, I knew Margot wasn't going to leave that easily. Spoiler alert, she didn't. What she ended up doing was fighting with the police officers and even threatening them. Let's just say it didn't take long before she was arrested. It turns out my sister-in-law spent the weekend in county jail because she couldn't afford the bail. My father-in-law and mother-in-law were absolutely furious. It was my fault, so I should pay for it. but Tyler shut them down immediately. Under no circumstances were we going to pay anything because it wasn't our job. She got herself into this literally by trespassing on our property. I'm not sure what's going to happen with her and her husband. I feel sorry for Thomas because he didn't ask for this. All he did was marry a woman to make her happy. It seems like this was his request. Well, as I said, if Margot had just listened to my advice all those years ago, maybe things would have ended differently. However, I'm not going to think about her anymore because she's not worth my time and energy.